Good evening to our UCD alumni and friends tuning in this evening. I'm delighted to extend a very warm welcome to this special online celebration of the UCD Alumni Awards 2020. Our 300,000 global alumni network in 184 countries is richly diverse and impressively far-reaching and is one of our greatest assets. It's fitting that we should honour the wonderful achievements of some of our most successful graduates annually. An outstanding UCD education has been the launchpad for leaders, influencers and innovators all over the world who are using their talents, intellect and creativity to change our global society for the better. The annual UCD Alumni Awards dinner in O'Reilly Hall is normally one of the highlights of the university alumni calendar. This year, unfortunately, the extraordinary circumstances of the global pandemic dictate that we move our celebration to an online format. Notwithstanding the difficulties of the past 8 months, our graduates and university community have rallied in the face of adversity, and I know that you are all with me in spirit as I warmly congratulate the 2020 UCD Alumni Awardees. This year, the award for Arts and Humanities goes to Dalton Phillips. The award for Business goes to Mark Pollock, and for Engineering and Architecture, it goes to Roisin Hennigan. Our awardee for Health and Agricultural Sciences is Professor Delia Grace Randolph, and for Law, Sally Hayden takes the award. For Research, Innovation and Impact, the award goes to Dr. Sandra Collins, and for Science, Dr. Cormac Kilty is our awardee. Finally, the award for Social Sciences goes to Sharon Donnery, and for Sport, Dr. Jack McCaffrey takes the award. Each of these individuals embodies UCD's pursuit of excellence and is an inspiration to us all. They are incredible role models for the present and future generations of UCD students who will seek to follow in their illustrious footsteps and make their own mark on the world. This year's celebration takes the format of 4 webinar conversations, each reflecting one of the pillars of UCD's Rising to the Future strategy. Our award winners will be grouped across these 4 events for engaging discussions on the themes of business, health, resilience and innovation. I'd also like to thank our strategic partners, our academic leaders and friends for their support on this special occasion. I extend my congratulations once again to our Alumni Award 2020 winners, and I look forward to welcoming you to campus in the future to celebrate in person.
Thank you, President. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the UCD Alumni Awards in Focus Conversation series. Unfortunately, given the situation with the pandemic, the UCD Alumni Awards Gala Dinner cannot take place as an in-person event this year. However, we're delighted to have in its place a virtual webinar series that will celebrate 9 of UCD's outstanding alumni awardees throughout the month of November. We're delighted to welcome our UCD alumni community from all around the world to hear from 9 of UCD's most notable alumni and showcase the breadth and depth of UCD's leading programs. The 4 UCD Alumni Awardees in Focus Conversations will reflect the 4 strategic themes of UCD's strategy entitled Rising to the Future. And these 4 are creating a sustainable global society, building a healthy world, thirdly, empowering humanity, and lastly, transforming through digital technology. Building a healthy world, One Health, is an approach to designing and implementing programs, policies, legislation and research in which multiple sectors communicate and work together to achieve better public health outcomes. Without further ado, allow me to introduce you to tonight's UCD Alumni Awardees. Professor Delia Grace Randolph is an epidemiologist and a veterinarian with 20 years' experience in developing countries. She is Professor for Food Safety Systems at the Natural Resources Institute in the UK, and she co-leads research into animal and human health at the International Livestock Research Institute in Kenya. Her career has spanned the private sector, field level, community development and aid management, as well as research. We're delighted to have Delia join us from Kenya this evening. Our second guest is Dr. Cormac Kilty, a biotech entrepreneur. He was the founder of Biotrin, a virology diagnostics company, and Argutus Medical. He's currently adjunct associate professor of medicine and medicinal chemistry at UCD. Now, Dr. Kilty studied science in UCD, where he reached 2 milestones, obtaining his BSc degree and meeting his future wife, Anne. He also obtained a PhD in zoology and biochemistry from UCD. Alongside a successful career in the biotech industry, he's maintained strong links with UCD. Now, before we start the conversation, you will hear from UCD College Principal at the College of Science, Professor Joe Carthy, and Dean of Veterinary Medicine, Professor Michael Doherty, about their 2 awardees.
I'm delighted to announce that Dr. Cormac Kilty is the 2020 UCD Science Alumni of the Year awardee. He graduated from UCD Science in 1975. So Cormac went on to complete his PhD in zoology and biochemistry at UCD. He followed this by a postdoctoral stint at the University of Texas and at UCD. He then joined Baxter Healthcare and was the head of their European Research and Development operation from 1987 to 1991. Cormac has been the founder of a number of companies, including Biotrin International, Opsona Therapeutics, and Argutus Medical. More recently, he served as the CTO of EKF Diagnostics and director of NextVet Biopharma. He has received a number of prestigious awards over his life, including the BioLink Life Sciences Achievement Award in 2007 and an honorary degree of Doctor of Science from UCD in 2013. Cormac's career exemplifies that of the rare individual who can combine a passion for science with business acumen. We're privileged that Cormac has maintained such close ties to the university. He's currently adjunct associate professor of medicinal chemistry at UCD and is available to staff and students as a source of advice. Cormac Kilty is an outstanding role model for UCD staff and students who strive for excellence in research and innovation.
I'm delighted that the recipient of the UCD Alumni Award in Health and Agricultural Sciences is Professor Delia Grace Randolph. Delia graduated MVB in 1990 from the UCD School of Veterinary Medicine, which was based in Ballsbridge at the time. A veterinary epidemiologist based at the Natural Resources Institute of the University of Greenwich, Delia is Programme Leader for Food Safety and Zoonosis at the International Livestock Institute, ILRI, Nairobi, Kenya, and Theme Leader on Agricultural Associated Disease for the Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research. Delia has over 20 years of experience in developing countries. Her research program focuses on the design and promotion of risk-based approaches to food safety in livestock production in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. She received the Trevor Blackburn Award for contributions to animal health and welfare in developing countries in 2014. She is lead author of the recent United Nations report, Preventing the Next Pandemic, Zoonotic Diseases and How to Break the Chain of Transmission, highly relevant in the context of the global COVID-19 pandemic. Delia's exceptional work resonates completely with the motto of the UCD School of Veterinary Medicine, One Health, One Welfare. The school and the College of Health and Agricultural Sciences are very proud of her. Tamaj an Vrodu Elasti. Congratulations, Delia. Kugarjahis Okri.
Cormac and Delia, you're very welcome to this conversation. Cormac, I'll start with you. Your memories of UCD and what you think UCD contributed to your development and success.
Wow, yeah. Well, first of all, I had a great time. It was just a fun place to be, both with science, friendships, and a lot of sport. But I think for me, the main thing with UCD, Pat, is I learned an enormous amount of science. I started off as a zoologist to become a marine biologist and ended up in biochemistry, studying basically anti-cancer treatments with my PhD supervisor, Paddy Joyce. And still almost everything I ever learned about proteins and I used in industry, I learned in that PhD. Things haven't changed that much. But then, I did a lot of organization. I ended up as chairman of the Science Association and the Biological Society. So you actually learn a lot about organizing things with a lot of friends. And I played hockey for a good few years and still play veterans hockey, would you believe, with a number of my teammates from 1978. So, it was just a great learning place right across the board,
Now, you are a great businessman as well as everything else. Was anything that you learned in UCD helpful in that regard?
Probably not a lot, to be honest. I mean, my friends recently reminded me that I used to sell tracksuits when I needed a few bob, and I never really thought that as business. And I actually put myself through graduate school with a lot of scuba diving. I used to collect a lot of specimens on the West Coast and preserve them and sell them around Europe. But I wouldn't consider that business. I always said I was broke. And when you're broke, you would do some interesting things. Yeah. So most of my business skills I learned when I worked in industry with some very good mentors.
Yeah, but there's no doubt the entrepreneurial spirit was there. Now, Delia, what about you and your time in UCD and how it led you to the very interesting and pretty exotic work that you do today?
Oh, yes. I mean, I have such great memories of my time in UCD. I think one thing is I trained as a veterinarian, and that really, it opens the world to you. You can do so many things. You can go to the public, private, or like I did to the development. My best memories, I think, are the friends I made and friends, I have to this day. And it was, it was kind of very cool for me coming from a very small rural community in the north of Ireland, where they were really, I didn't have that opportunity to have intellectual interactions, and then to get to UCD, and it was like the whole world opened up, and it was wonderful, and I'm very grateful.
As it happens, both of your skill sets are very relevant in the climate of the pandemic we have today. I mean, we are told that this began with a zoonotic activity where something jumped the species barrier, and it appears that is more and more going to happen in the future. So the pandemic may be one of many that will follow. And then from Cormac's point of view, it's his industry that's charged with helping us with vaccines and therapeutics. So tell me, Delia, about your work.
Oh, I've been working, since I spent 5 years in private practice, which was a very good learning experience. And since then, I've been in developing countries and working mainly on diseases which, as you say, jump from animals to people, including COVID. It's interesting. There's a lot of potential, but there's also a lot of things which are not going well at the moment, and if we don't get them right, they're going to get worse. You think this COVID-19 is bad? This COVID-19 is just a playground for what the pandemics which we've had in the past and which we can have in the future. Pandemics which killed 95% of people in the native populations of North America. So COVID is nasty, but if we have to get on top of these emerging pandemics.
Has zoonosis always occurred? I mean, do we have records going back in history to something jumping the species barrier and causing us harm?
Absolutely. We think the first really bad zoonosis happened when in the Neolithic revolution, when people first domesticated livestock, and that's when we got diseases like measles and whooping cough and scarlet fever, all jumping directly from domesticating livestock. And now what we're starting to do in Africa and Southeast Asia is domesticating wildlife, like civet cats and armadillos, our hunting wild animals. And that is opening the doors to another huge disease emergence, which, like our first Neolithic disease emergence, could literally kill more than half the human race at any given time.
So is it fair to say that our domestication of animals, cattle and sheep and pigs for food, has effectively eliminated their typical diseases from harming us? In other words, we can now live in harmony with those creatures, but not with wild creatures who've not yet been domesticated.
To some extent, certainly they are safer. The trouble is they can also act as amplifiers. So what can happen is we find that there's a disease in a wild animal, like wild birds, wild migrating birds, and then it spills over into domestic birds. Then it does a bit of evolving to kind of get used to those domestic birds, and then it spills over to people. So unfortunately, although many of the most emerging diseases, now 75% do come from wild animals, our domestic livestock can be an amplifier for these horrible diseases.
So, Cormac, the task that is facing your industry is to come up with vaccines and therapeutics. Has the current pandemic, I mean, the last major one we're told was 100 years ago in 1918, the so-called Spanish flu. We've had other smaller outbreaks of zoonotic diseases and so on. But has your industry learned a huge amount by virtue of the pressure that is on to produce therapeutics and vaccines?
Yeah, I mean, I probably the answer is yes, they've learned a reasonable amount, but all of the technology and the wherewithal to deliver vaccines, diagnostic tests, and treatments that are being fast-tracked, we've had for quite a number of years. So we haven't had any vast amount of new technology that was required. It was really applying the technologies we've had, and a lot of cooperation between companies where they've really fast-tracked it. So things like, Regeneron's monoclonal antibody mixer with President Trump got, that, dare I say, it was a relatively straightforward task. There's always things to jump over, but that was doable. I just would never believe that would not have worked. The diagnostic tests all came out awfully quickly because we now have DNA sequencing and PCR. I sequenced my first gene in 1979. So the first cloning was only in 1975. So relatively recently, we've developed all these skills. So we have the wherewithal to do this. But unfortunately, as Delia is saying, the Western world will get a big plus out of this. It's the poorer countries, whether or not we can develop large enough volume to ship to them, and then the cost of it.
Now, in terms of the speed of development, I mean, the Oxford vaccine using what are they calling it, a viral vector technique.
Vector, yeah.
How is it that this is able to happen so fast? I mean, even the pessimists are saying, if the vaccines are proven to be clinically safe and effective, it's done in literally a calendar year before parts of the general population start getting this thing. And yet in the past, it might be 7-8 years before a vaccine would be released. What's different now?
Well, I mean, I do honestly believe urgency is a massive part of it. I mean, if you put an awful lot more scientists on it, you have bigger teams, you can, instead of having a team of 20 people doing work, you have 100 people, they'll do it 5 times as fast, mostly. But the Oxford vaccine already had a platform that had the capability to generate vaccines pretty quickly. So in terms of modern technology, that's relatively recent. So they were in a good position to move pretty quickly. I think, I've been through the FDA and similar organizations. They generally took a very, very long time, and people were very slow approaching them. And, before we had internet, you would have a truckload of documents, literally a truck, that would be backed up to the FDA in Bethesda in Washington. So all of that has speeded up. The regulatory part, and the FDA has agreed to speed it up. So there's quite, basically each section of the development has been concertinaed a bit. And they have taken some shortcuts in the regulatory. They will allow some products out with maybe significant data. I don't think it's incorrect to do that. But in the past, they might have waited for a lot more data, if all that makes sense.
At the same time, you have to be careful when there's meddling with the regulatory process. I mean, we saw with the 737 MAX, for instance, that the regulators and the manufacturers were hand in glove, and the kind of checks that should have been done were not done. Now we've got politicians meddling in the regulatory process. I mean, does danger lie ahead in that kind of situation?
Yeah, I don't think so, honestly. I'm very, you know, a lot of the times, in fact, when the FDA took a bit long with my products, is that they were asking the wrong questions. They asked all the right ones and then some more wrong ones, so you had to go back and talk to them. No, I would be very happy that these organizations, and particularly in Europe as well, are doing all the right checks. And I don't think any of these people will allow themselves to be pushed out too quickly for politics. I mean, it's tantamount to murder if you do that. And we all entered science to help patients. So I would be very surprised if that happens. Genuine, I have faith in human nature, not political nature. Human nature.
Delia, the possibility that those less fortunate in the world will get access to vaccines, because there has been a commitment by Big Pharma that they will try to get supplies to the third world. What's your confidence level that that will actually happen?
Well, to be honest, I think they'll get it to some people, but it will be very hard to get it to everyone who needs it. You know, there are so many slips between the glass and the glass and the lip, and between people who are culturally, there's some cultural, even in places like America, there's some cultural kind of fears about vaccines are going to make you sterile or something, and then just the whole logistics and getting it to, I honestly don't see it happening. I mean, we've only eradicated 2 diseases, smallpox and rinderpest. Polio, it's back and forth and back and forth. This vaccine, even if it comes, we don't know whether the protection will last you for 6 months or for longer. So I'm sorry to be a bit of a pessimist on this. But I think it's going to be really hard to get a vaccine to 7 billion people for free.
But the whole concept of One Health is that because of the nature of modern travel, the globe is a small place now, that unless everybody gets protection, nobody has protection.
The concept of One Health too is you stop it in the environment, you stop it in the animal host, you never let it get into people. Once you've got it into people, then you're in what we're now, $1 trillion of damage and, millions of cases. If we'd stopped that when it was just one spillover from a bat into a pangolin or whatever it was, how much money would we have saved? And the World Bank has done studies on this and showed that if we have proper surveillance, we catch these diseases, we protect the ecosystem, we protect the environment, we stop these spillovers. And when they do spill over, as they will, we catch them fast. We save trillions of dollars and millions of lives. What's wrong with that?
When you portray these things as happening, like accidentally almost, or because of maybe hunting that's going on that no one knew about, and then the hunters mix with people they never mixed with before, because I think in Vietnam they reckon some people might have an immunity to SARS-CoV-2 because of what they've experienced in their past. But we are now encroaching more on habitats. We are now probably meeting creatures we shouldn't be meeting, who are minding their own business in their bat caves or wherever they were. I mean, do we need to stop that kind of human activity to ensure that this thing does not happen again and again and again?
Absolutely. The more we harvest wild meat, which is often poached and illegal, and the more we try to farm, animals like civet cats or pangolins, which, we've never farmed in the past, the more likely we are to get, and the more we go into bat caves to harvest, guano, the more we're going to get these diseases. We need to have better ways of keeping ecosystems safe and managing the interaction between people, livestock, and wild animals in ways which are not going to encourage more and more spillovers.
So, Cormac, in your industry, I mean, you are, if you like, the fire brigade and the fire prevention officers. I mean, the vaccines are the fire prevention and the therapeutics are the firemen and women who are putting out the fires. How does your industry view this? I mean, are they altruistic in what they are doing, or do they all see this as potentially down the road, when we're over the emergency, a nice little earner year after year after year, like the flu vaccine might be? Now we'll have the COVID vaccine and maybe dozens more vaccines to keep us all out of hospital.
Yeah. Well, as somebody who started a number of companies, I'm really not against a nice little earner. It's always important to note that when pharmaceutical companies are spending fortunes on developing something, they all have our pension money in there and so on and so forth. So a profit has to be made. But I think there's a lot of altruism. They know that they have to make profits, and that's going to be in the Western world. I mean, as Delia said, we are in two worlds here. I mean, we don't have anything to do in Europe, let's say, with managing animal diseases in the developing world with all the animals she mentioned being farming. The technology is available to be the fireman and the diagnostic. So anything new that comes, we will be able to move very quickly, I have no doubt. But it's the World Health Organization, the World Animal Organization, as Delia said, if we can do more to support them, I think we definitely can cut things out. We've been relatively good at stopping Ebola coming out of Africa. So it's a balance. But the Western world and the companies have to make some money to be able to help patients. Otherwise, you have no chance. And at the end of the day, we need to get all of these products to patients.
Do you have any reflections on how, the leader of the Western world was the United States, and now it's not best in class anymore, walking away from the WHO and other international organizations? Does that weaken the whole international effort?
Well, with the present government, it does, that's for sure. Until relatively recently, there was an enormous amount of cooperation. And there still is a lot of cooperation. If you take all our scientists in UCD, they're working internationally all the time. And so at that level, there's a lot of cooperation. But nationalism is a bit rampant in a lot of our Western world countries, and America is beginning to show that. They are the defender of the Western world, so to speak, and hopefully, when they give more thought to a new regime, they may be, may play ball a bit more. But at the moment, it's from the leadership role, there's no doubt it's not being supportive, which is a big pity. But you still have people, as Delia will tell you, like the Gates Foundation, and you talked about altruism, who are really putting their money where it matters, the anti-malarial treatments and so on. So there's a lot of good stuff happening, I have no doubt.
And Delia, does it give anyone, for example, in Kenya, any grim satisfaction to see how badly the developed world has actually, certainly in some areas, coped with this thing?
No, I think not at all. Kenya has suffered so much. We're very dependent on tourism. That's kind of one of our biggest industries. Tourism has almost stopped. We haven't had high levels of deaths or illnesses, although that seems to be getting a little bit worse. But, we have a young population with very few comorbidities. But I think Kenya is suffering. I think we'll suffer. The poor countries are going to suffer much more from COVID and our attempts to control it than the rich countries, unfortunately. And that's what the evidence is coming out, that, kids losing schooling, stunting rising, hunger rising, deaths rising. It's us in the poor countries who, as usual, are going to bear the brunt of this.
Do you ever feel hopeless about the whole thing?
No, I think we have solutions. We have ways forward. I mean, it's incredibly good the way we have technology when I was in vet school, which we couldn't even, we didn't even have genome sequencing, or there's so many things we didn't have and we have now. A big data, mobile phones, everyone with a mobile phone in Africa. So I think there's a lot of hope, but there's also a lot of challenges.
Cormac, I saw you nodding in agreement with Delia.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm positive. I have a lot of hope, and Delia hits the nail on the head. I mean, the developing countries are just not going to get as much support as we are in the Western world. And when you have maybe Kenya, but certainly places like India, where many individuals have to work per day just to eat, they're not going to self-distance. But we have all the technologies, and we need to get together. And as Delia said at the beginning, we need to work together and somehow block a lot of these developments early. The technology is not the issue. Once something hits the Western world of this nature, we can take care of it. Maybe not tomorrow, it might take 6 or 8 months, but I'd be surprised if we get some other viruses that we can't use this fast-track technology to help. But that doesn't help the rest of the world. That's the problem.
And finally, about that question of herd immunity, the idea that you let the vulnerable die and those who are fit and well. It's almost Darwinism in practice. What do you think of that notion? Cormac first.
I was hoping you'd ask Delia because she's the animal epidemiologist. No, look, those who've spoken in Europe about herd immunity, you have to get to such a high level of infection or vaccination to get there. It's certainly not a route one should be taking to open the doors. Too many people will die, and who's going to select them? We can control this with all of the things we're doing today. And the reason we have this big upsurge in Ireland and the rest of the countries, people didn't follow the rules. You can only get this from close contact. So herd immunity, I think, would just cause too many deaths. And once we have the vaccine, that will essentially become herd immunity, but won't do a lot of help for the poor people in Africa who just won't get enough of the vaccine.
Delia?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think we need cocooning. So people who are like my mum, who are older and more vulnerable, they definitely need to have a much stronger, protective cover around them. I think in places like Africa, where we've had pretty low levels of, we've a really young population, very few comorbidities. The costs of trying to curfew and lockdown are much worse than actually the losses we're experiencing. So I think in it has to be context specific, and we have to use the best tools we have, but we can't rely on herd immunity. Vaccines are great for people who can afford them. For people who can't afford them, then you have to protect the vulnerable and perhaps let the people who, as Cormac was saying, who work from day to day, if they don't work that day, they don't get that $2 and they don't eat. You have to let them go back to work.
Okay. Finally, to you both, words of wisdom based on your experience for those young potential graduates and young alumni who have yet to make their ways in the world. We'll start with you this time, Delia.
Oh, I would say a degree from UCD will take you anywhere. And if you want to do biomedicine, that will take you even further.
Cormac?
Yes, I would have to agree. It's very what I said in my note in the magazine. Kids should follow what really that turns them on and what they enjoy. You can't start going and say, I do a degree in accountancy because I want to make sure I don't starve. So UCD presents all the possibilities. You should follow your heart. But I think to remember that, when you went to UCD or Trinity or Oxford to read a subject, what you came away with was a trained mind. So you may be good at commerce or science, but what the universities are still very interested to this. You have a trained mind, you can analyze things. And when you're comfortable that you have that, you can do anything. But one of the big things I find now getting a little bit older is all the jobs in the world that I never knew existed when I was starting. And so it's only when you're looking back, you can see there's so many interesting things to do that you don't always need a specific degree for. But like Delia, we need more scientists, that's for sure.
All right. On that note, Cormac and Delia, thank you very much for joining us today. Well, thank you to both Delia and Cormac for a wonderful conversation, and a special thanks to all of you for being with us this evening. We look forward to welcoming you to our next UCD Alumni Awardee in Focus conversation next week with Dr. Sandra Collins and Roisin Heenahan. Visit the UCD Alumni Awards website to register. Well, now it's my pleasure to introduce Nicole Black, Director of Alumni Development, to say a few words. Stay safe and well.
What an absolutely fascinating conversation. I hope you found that as interesting and thought-provoking as I did. It's a real privilege to know that our UCD alumni are driving such important change and helping to shape the world beyond COVID-19 for future generations. I'd like to thank our awardees this evening for giving so generously of their time to share their UCD experience, insight, and inspirational achievements with us. In this exceptionally difficult period, we know our awardees have many demands on their time right now, and we are delighted they were able to join with us tonight. Our alumni are the backbone of this great institution, and despite these challenging times, we are more committed than ever to strengthening the links our alumni have forged with both UCD and each other through our alumni programme of online events and celebrations such as tonight. While we can't unfortunately all be together in person, it is still so important to celebrate our alumni's achievements and through them show the breadth of impact UCD alumni continue to make all over the world. Our 2020 UCD Alumni Awardees are truly some of our brightest and best, and we are delighted to have been able to showcase them in tonight's very special webinar. As ever, a big thank you to the wonderful Pat Kenny, a fellow alumnus and dear friend of UCD, for hosting the conversation for us again. The awards may look a little bit different this year, but they just wouldn't be the same without you, Pat. A huge thank you as well to all the alumni team behind the scenes for helping to reimagine this year's awards under difficult and often ever-changing circumstances, ensuring that this important celebration could still go ahead. And of course, thank you to all of you for joining us tonight in helping to celebrate our outstanding awardees and being proud of what makes the UCD Alumni Awards such a special event for all of us. As we close tonight's event, it just remains for me to wish all of you, wherever you are from, all the very best for joining us in these incredibly difficult times. Please stay safe and well, and we look forward to welcoming you to more upcoming events with UCD. From all of us, take care and good night.